Hi, I'm MTG, and welcome to another Deck Tech Breakdown. And today we're talking about Tori D'Avenant, Fury Rider. And sorry if I botched the pronunciation of that commander. She is 4 CMC and has Vigilance, Trample. And what I think is really interesting is obviously her ability here. So whenever they attack, all other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. If it's red, it gets Trample. And if another white creature is attacking too, you untap it. So it's kind of like it has Vigilance, but it still taps. I don't know. Anyways, I think this is a really fun, at least like Boros hit face commander. And I did play around with it a little bit in Historic Brawl, and it can be pretty spicy. Like pretty early on, you can just punch face and deal a lot of damage. And of course, you're in Boros, which supports an aggressive archetype. So I think there's like some pretty cool directions you could take this commander if you want. And I think like if you're gonna break down like overall strategy, you're gonna probably want to be more on the aggro side of things and have at least like some sort of like anthem effects or boosting to help make like maybe squishy 1/1 tokens that you're trying to go wide with, beefy and hit face for more damage. So what I think will help make this deck successful is obviously board protection. But one of the problems that I've had in the past with any sort of like Boros commanders, especially ones that rely heavily on your commander being in play, like General Ferris, you really need to have solid board protection. And I think, again, some of the most important like board protection pieces you could have are phase out effects. So Guardian of Faith, Teferi's Protection, are pretty much auto includes in a lot of these types of decks where, well, really that just have white, but specifically that really care about creatures. So another thing that's going to be really helpful too is going to be Indestructible. So Frontline Medic is going to be super cool. And one of my favorite closers that's good for protecting your board or just winning you the game right out of nowhere is Achroma's Will. So those two effects there are really good for offensive effects and defensive if you're trying to keep your stuff from dying. So another thing too that is going to be helpful is combat protection. So what you want there is something like Iros, God of Victory. And this god is really interesting. I definitely had it in my General Ferris deck when it was still together. It gives creatures menace, but it also prevents all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. So I think that kind of opens up you to feel more confident with swinging out freely. And what's cool too is if you have your commander in play and you're attacking with your commander, you can untap your white creatures and have essentially blockers. So even if you swing all out, you at least have some way to keep yourself a little bit like on the defensive side of things because they untap and can be blockers later. So I think with that, you're always going to want to have some way of feeling confident to swing out with your board and not feel like you're going to get punished on, the counter attack. So consistent ways that you can kind of untap your creatures or give vigilance to like all your board, that when you swing out, that they're not tapping out necessarily if your commander is not in play. So you probably want some like alternate effects that are outside of what your commander does that can pretty much untap your creatures or give your creatures vigilance. So some of my like more favorite cards that I like to use, at least for untap effects, are things like Halo Fountain, because you can draw a card. And then there's also a really silly win con where I think it's like untapping 15 creatures and you like win the game, which could be possible if you're playing stuff like Adaline or Hero of the Bladehold, where you're creating tokens when you attack and stuff like that. So it might be somewhat of a feasible win con if people don't have an answer to your board state, especially if you're able to protect it. So that's just, I don't know, a fun thing I like throwing out there. And then I also like Thraben Watcher. It doesn't give tokens vigilance, but I still think it's a powerful thing for you to have because, again, you're going to want things that have like backup effects that what your commander already does, but you want to find a way to make that possible for, if your commander's not in play. Because again, a lot of times with these Boros commanders, you're going to want a backup commander and not have to depend your whole strategy on your commander, because if it gets removed and, you have to spend all this mana to get it back and rebuild your board state, it's going to be a little tough to really close out a game and win it if you're constantly having to depend on rebuilding your board state through your commander. So again, adding in effects that are going to give other creatures trample, that are going to give other creatures vigilance, just like what your commander is trying to do, I think are going to be really key or continuing your strategy and pushing forward. Another effect that I think is going to be super powerful is something that gives all your creatures haste. So I usually like Urbrask of the Hidden. With this, I think another effect too that's going to be obviously really important is having some sort of anthem effect. You want to make your little squishies a lot bigger. So I like using stuff like Wedding Announcement because at first it spits out tokens or give you card draw, and then you can flip it over after it gets 3 counters on it, and it gives all your creatures +1/+1 to their attack power. So that's pretty sweet. And then Balefire Liege I think is really good too, just because, again, if you're casting a red spell or a white spell, it's going to reward you for that, but then it also boosts like your board, +1/+1 to their attack power and toughness. So that's pretty sweet. I also like Legion's Initiative. It's going to be more beneficial like for, more multicolored spells that you have out on the board, but it's still pretty helpful because it also can like help you save your board state, because if you pay a red and a white, you can essentially flicker your board out and avoid like a board wipe. The only issue is you do lose your tokens still, but at least you keep like some of your maybe core creatures there. But it also just is a passive like anthem boost for your, red and white creatures. So I like that card a lot. And then you have Damage Doublers, which I think is just going to be another way that you can close out the game. Fiery Emancipation, again, is one of those cards that you have to be a little bit careful with, because if you cast it, you are going to be basically branded the enemy. Then you have Thorbrand as well, which will, double the damage to, or increase your damage to red creatures. So those are helpful. Another one too that I think I've heard friends reference as like White's Craterhoof Behemoth is going to be Mirror Entity, because you can pay X amount of mana and then make the power and toughness of your creatures equal to X. It's also good if you need to, like, for whatever reason, like mass kill everything on the board so it doesn't get like maybe exiled or something. You can make the 0 cost happen, and then like all your creatures become 0 toughness and die. So that could be like a way maybe to get around Farewell if it's not hitting the graveyard or something. But just a thought there. Some fun cards I thought for this commander would be stuff like Witty Roastmaster, and this is a new Capenna card where whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So if you're spitting out a lot of tokens because you're, playing cards like Adeline or, Hero Bladehold, then I think this card's going to do quite a bit of damage because it's just going to be pinging everyone for a little bit. And another card too that I think is like pretty interesting, and I haven't had a chance yet to cast it in a game. I've been trying, I've been throwing it in a lot of decks, but it's called Ascend from Avernus, and you pay X and 3 white mana, and you can return all creatures and planewalker cards with mana value X or less from your graveyard and put them onto the battlefield, and then you exile Ascend. But I think it's interesting because it's this mass reanimation spell that you would kind of just expect to be in black, but not necessarily white. So just imagine like a board wipe happens, you drop this, you get everything back, and then if you have a hasty effect, you could even potentially just kill everyone on the board after that. So I really like this card, and I'm just waiting for the day that I can cast it and potentially win a game from it. So yeah. Anyways, that was just kind of like my brief overview of this commander. I was wanting to build it at some point, but there's a lot of other commanders as well that I'm very interested in Dominaria. So I might try this maybe in the future on like an episode of Good Clean Commander. We shall see. But anyways, thank you so much for your time. And as always, I would love to hear what cards you'd be interested in adding to this commander, or, if you've tried out this commander and you like it a lot. It's super interesting to hear everyone's experiences. I always appreciate it when you share them. And thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye.